time to start using Git now and manage some of our code with it. If you haven't actually got Git installed, now's probably a good time to go and do that. I'd recommend that you install Git from git-scm.com. There'll be a link to this in the description. And this is the official place for basically all things Git. You'll find all of the project documentation here. You'll find releases for Git here as well. These will be all the latest versions. This is the official source of all things Git. You can get Git if you install things like GitHub Desktop, which is the way that I used to do it, but then you've got the bloat of GitHub Desktop to deal with as well, which you're probably never going to use. It's also a graphical client for using Git, and I would say for the most part, just stay away from using graphical clients. As much as possible, stay away from them. Because graphical clients often have their own ways of doing things, and every time I've seen massive problems with Git, like every single file in the entire code base is changed, it's usually because of a graphical client that's enforcing some kind of opinion on the code that we don't use. So download yourself a command line version of Git. You'll find it from the download section of gitscm.com. If you're running a Mac, you can get it from brew install git if you're using Homebrew. Windows, I definitely recommend downloading it from here. If you're on Linux, it will give you the instructions for installing it via the command line, which is how I recommend you do it. So if you do need to install Git, make sure you pause the video at this point, go and install it, and we'll wait for you, and when you're ready, we'll get started. So now that you've got Git installed, we need to verify that Git's all set up and running properly. So from anywhere on your system, if you just type Git at the command line, it'll give you a bunch of output, including a list of commands that you can run via Git. This is how you know that everything's set up and working. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create ourselves a new directory to hold our projects that we're going to be managing with Git. For me, that's just going to be a VCS course. And hop into that directory, I'm going to type git init. And what this will do is this will create a .git directory for us. And this contains all the config and everything that Git uses, so it knows like your author name and your author email address, and you can configure all sorts of stuff in there. But for the most part, you'll never actually need to go in that directory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into VS Code, and I'm going to open this directory. No, I'm going to open the directory, not the file. Now we're in here. I'm just going to create a new file called index.js. And all this is going to contain is a function that runs when the page loads. It's just going to log hello world to the console. It doesn't actually matter whether this works or not because we're only looking at Git in this instance. So if we come back to our terminal again, we'll just make sure that everything's cleared. So now at our terminal, if we run git status, we'll see straight away that there's index.js in here, and this appears under a section called untracked files. Don't worry too much about the rest of the output here. This top section here on branch master just tells you what branch you're currently on. This one that says no commits yet at the minute will usually tell you whether you're in front or behind of the remote, but don't worry too much about the remote. We'll be covering that in a future lesson. And then there's this third section here which will basically show you all of the changes that Git has detected. In this instance, it's telling us that we have index.js, which is a new file that Git has never seen before. That's why it's called untracked. And of course, we do actually want to track changes to this file because we want to be able to go back in time and see what the file was like at a previous point in history. We want to see who changed what and when. So we need to add index.js to Git. We need to tell Git to start tracking this file. And to do that, we type git add index.js. And then if we clear the output and we do git status, we'll see that this section has changed now. So it says changes to be committed because we've added the file. It shows us there's a new file, index.js. This means that Git will now start tracking this file, and any changes that are made to it we'll be able to see in detail. But this on its own is not enough. What we need to do now is we need to create a commit. So we need to type git commit -m and then put a set of quotation marks. And in here we need to write a commit message. A commit message is a very important part of any project that's managed using Git. Because each commit can contain any number of changes that can be a whole bunch of different types, like files can be added or deleted, they can be changed, maybe they've moved, maybe they've been renamed. Any number of these changes of any number of different types can be included in a commit. So it's very important that the commit message that we give to it is just succinct enough to describe what's actually going on and why, but it's not so long that it's going to bore people to death reading it so they just skip over it. At this point, I would advise, if you're going to type the phrase made changes, please stop. Do not type it. The main reason for that is that projects that grow in size and keep getting worked on can sometimes have hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of commits. And the first time that you type the commit message made changes is the start of a very slippery slope. Every single commit message after that point, there'll be the temptation to call it made changes. And when there's thousands of those commits, it's impossible to tell why changes were made and something has broken. And now you're trying to find which one out of these couple of thousand commits called made changes is the one that broke something. So the way that I was taught to do it was imagine your commit message as an email signature. It should be short, concise, and give just the right amount of information to make somebody want to look at the email and what's actually in it. But again, resist the urge to do made changes and resist the urge to clickbait your commit messages. So in this particular instance, I'm going to go with something like add main JavaScript file. No, add main JavaScript entry point. There's no shame in rewording your commit message a couple of times before you actually punch it in. Have a think about it before you actually do it. There's no shame in that. If you can't quite think of the right way to phrase it, ask someone. Maybe ask your project lead or a teammate or something, what do you think I should give for this commit message? And they'll give you a good idea of what they'd want to see in the list of commits. Coming back from our little tangent there, if we hit enter, we'll see that this commit has now been created. It shows us a brief summary of what actually happened. So it shows us the branch that the commit was made on. This root commit here just means that this is the very first commit in a project. It shows you the last 6, don't know what you call it really, the characters of the hash, because each commit has a hash generated for it, and it gives us the commit message. And then it shows us what's actually contained within this. So one file has changed. Technically one file has been added, but one file has been changed, which has 3 insertions, which means 3 lines, because there's 3 lines in this particular file. So this 3 insertions part here, this shows us the total number of lines that were added or changed in this commit. So if we had 10 copies of this files in here, there'd be 30 insertions because there's 30 new lines of code that have been added. It will also give you a count of the lines that were removed, which is also quite important moving forwards. If we clear this now and we go to git log is a log of all the commits that have been made on a project. So now we'll see that our commit that we just created is in here with our commit message, and there's also a bunch of other information in here which you don't really need to worry about. We've got the full commit hash, and we've also got head and master here. These are basically some pointers about where we actually are on which branch. I won't worry too much about these. You only need to worry about these when you're starting to work on multiple branches. But now you should have a brand new project with 1 JavaScript file in it, 3 lines of code, and a single commit. Good stuff. Congratulations.